Hello, welcome. Everybody, thank you for coming. Thanks for staying around for the panel. The panel is Our Political Future with Adam Jentleson, Judis, Congressman Andy Levin, and moderator Mara Liasson. We're delighted to be able to do a panel on politics, and when Andy texted me and said he would be on the island, I knew we had the perfect political panel, the dream team to complete an excellent discussion on what's happening in politics today. Indeed, some of you know that we have Senator Amy Klobuchar on Sunday, but we may not have Senator Amy Klobuchar because of the infrastructure bill in the Senate. So we may end up having to do something that's remote with her in Washington and Cecilia Kang interviewing her from here. So it's a little bit more complicated, but we will make it work. Anyway, just a few items to go over. We have a 6 o'clock panel on journalism that in many ways builds on this panel, The Future of Journalism. It's part of the 175th anniversary of the Vineyard Gazette. So we will both be celebrating them as well as discussing what's happening in the future of journalism. As this is the last panel of the day here, of the daytime, I wanted to particularly acknowledge the beautiful space that we're in. The Martha's Vineyard Museum. This is our first time here, and how can you beat that view? I'm afraid when you come to Chilmark tomorrow, when you're looking at the tennis court and the basketball court, you're gonna think we're a little shabby, but at least for one day. So do buy the books. If you didn't get the books, the complete package in your ticket, you can buy the books over right there at the book sales tent. We, as it turns out, over-purchased lunches, and rather than have them go to waste, we encourage each of you to pick up a complimentary lunch before you go home. And then I just wanted to mention that we do have the book bags on sale. There's water over there, so make sure you're hydrated. And some of you, I assume, are staying around for the 6 o'clock panel, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. Turning to Mara Liasson. Mara Liasson is a national political correspondent for NPR. Her reports can be heard regularly on NPR's award-winning news magazine programs, Morning Edition and All Things Considered. Liasson provides extensive coverage of politics and policy from Washington, D.C., but she also happens to spend some time on Martha's Vineyard. We're delighted she does. She focuses on the White House and Congress. Prior to her current assignment, Liasson was NPR's White House correspondent for all 8 years of the Clinton administration. Before joining NPR, Liasson was a freelance radio and television reporter in San Francisco. She was also managing editor and anchor of California Edition, a California public radio nightly news program. And most importantly, she was a print journalist for the Vineyard Gazette. So everything comes back to home.
That's what they're looking for. All right.
And that's the reason we invited her. So Mara, I will turn it over to you. And I thank you all for being here, and I thank Andy especially.
Well, thank you very much. It's so nice to be here. Not necessarily back here. I spent 13 months here during COVID with my family. I'm doing everything virtually. And I am the national political correspondent for National Public Radio, and I just want to say that covering politics is a lesson in humility, because every single day you learn that all the things you thought you knew were wrong. And I'm really thrilled to be able to moderate this panel, because I've had the pleasure of interviewing Adam, or having John's work influence my reporting for many, many years, or having Andy on the panel, someone that I met here on the island in shul with his dad. So we're going to broaden this out. This isn't just the future of American politics. This is kind of the future, as in who's going to win the midterms. It's the future of American democracy. And I'm going to read the bios of our panelists and then get us started. Adam Jentleson, at the end, Executive Director of the Progressive War Room Battleborn Collective, which I learned is what Nevada's
State
slogan.
motto, that's right.
Because, of course, he was Deputy Chief of Staff to Senator Harry Reid. He was a senior advisor on political, legislative, and communication strategy through all the fights of the Obama years. His work has been cited as influencing the debate over reforming the filibuster in the Senate and motivating Democrats to be aggressive. In addition to the New York Times, Jentleson's writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Politico, and GQ. He is here at the festival with his new book, Kill Switch, The Rise of the Modern Senate and the Crippling of American Democracy. Strong letter to follow. And you can buy it here. John Judis, we only have orange books on this panel. John Judis is the editor-at-large at Talking Points Memo. He's a former senior writer at the National Journal, former senior national editor at the New Republic. He is the author of many, many books, including The Populist Explosion, The Nationalist Revival, and The Socialist Awakening, which he has combined and updated in one. This is a you get 3 for the price of 1 if you buy this book. He also wrote a very important but much misunderstood book called The Emerging Democratic Majority in 2002, which we will definitely talk about. And Congressman Andy Levin. He is here on the panel, along with me, to provide some balance. Neither of us have written a book. But you have to have some non-book writers to balance this panel. He is obviously Congressman from Michigan. What the Levins are doing on Martha's Vineyard is a whole other story. You can ask them later. He's a union organizer, human rights activist, workforce policy expert, and green energy entrepreneur. Congressman Andy Levin has spent his career fighting for an equitable and inclusive future for all people. He serves Michigan's 9th Congressional District. His work on immigration and labor have been combined in such work as Assistant Director of Organizing at the National AFL-CIO, Michigan's No Work Left Behind, and Michigan's Green Job Initiative. He's also the founder of Levin Energy Partners, LLC, which is an entrepreneurial force to help shape Michigan's and America's energy future. I just want to start the discussion by saying that we have had, for the last 4 or 5 years, what is basically a stress test on democratic institutions. And they survived by the skin of their teeth, but maybe not much more than that. And it's not just the Trump administration, it's post-Trump, January 6th, the attack on the Capitol by American insurrectionists, not a foreign power, and now the widespread effort to turn January 6th into either a patriotic protest that just got out of hand or something that should be ignored. And then you have the effort of Republican legislators in battleground states, not just to partisan gerrymander or make it harder for Democratic-leaning voters to cast a ballot, but actually making it easier for partisan legislatures to take control of the election machinery, put their thumb on the scale of election results to increase the chances that Republicans will never lose a close race. So is this just normal partisanship? Would Democrats do the exact same thing? Or is this something more and something more dangerous, constitutional hardball that actually undermines the fabric of democracy? So I'd just like to start this panel by asking each of our panelists to talk about something that makes you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of American democracy, or maybe you have something in each column. Adam, why don't you start?
Sure. Thanks, Mara, and thank you all for being here. It's really a pleasure. So I think I'll give one thing that makes me both optimistic and pessimistic for the sake of efficiency. So I would say this moment we're in now, where it seems that the Senate is on track to pass a bipartisan infrastructure bill, which will likely pave the way for a larger reconciliation bill. The jobs report that came out today was very healthy, just an all-around great report showing the economy is booming. And then I think David Brooks wrote a column today that sort of captured this sort of under the whole heading that the system seems to be working. So I think the reason I think that is cause for both optimism and pessimism is that the optimism is obvious, that this Biden seems to be delivering on this promise that he is going to be able to make the system work, to restore bipartisanship, to deliver on his campaign promises, to make the economy boom and provide jobs. And this validates the idea that the system is fundamentally healthy and can work. That's the cause for optimism. The cause for pessimism is that it's a facade, and that we are experiencing this moment where the infrastructure, the bipartisan piece of the infrastructure bill is great, but really is, sort of a glorified highway appropriations bill, and its real significance is in paving the way to pass a much larger, approximately $3 trillion bill, $3 trillion spending bill along reconciliation through non-traditional means. Most of what Biden has passed so far was in the American Rescue Plan, which was passed through reconciliation and non-traditional means. His nominees are being confirmed smoothly, but only because Democrats reformed the filibuster in 2013 to allow them to avoid filibusters. So the fact that the idea that the system is working may not be true, and may sort of reputationally refresh Republicans, McConnell, and dig Democrats, recalcitrant Democrats, further in against the reforms that are probably necessary to fix the system and to decrease some of the entrenched institutional advantages that conservatives now enjoy. So I think where we go from here, whether this ends up being a cause for optimism or pessimism, largely depends on where the Biden administration decides to go. But I think if we go all in on the idea that this shows that the system is working, we may find, once it's too late, that wasn't really true, that the system does have these fundamental flaws that are going to really hurt the status of our democracy in the next few years.
Right, and we'll drill down on some of those fundamental flaws in a minute. But John?
Okay, I'm going to give a somewhat broader view. Try to take a look at what the forces are that are provoking this crisis of democracy that we're having now. If you think about the last 30 or 40 years, what we've had really is a breakdown of a whole set of assumptions that governed policy and governed the relationship between government and the economy, and between the United States and other countries. I'm thinking about the ideas of free markets, virtually, again, borders that are, again, not open, but somewhat that way, unregulated finance, optimism about China and Russia joining a new world economy governed by the WTO. All that really has come crashing down. And the question is where we go from there. And just again, to focus on the relationship between government and economy, because this is sort of where democracy is going to come down. I don't want to get into the Hitler thing with you, but the last time this really happened in a dramatic way globally was the late 1920s, the end of the gold standard, the end of all the dreams about laissez-faire in the United States with Coolidge Hoover. And you saw the economies of the U.S. and Western Europe going in two very different directions. United States, New Deal liberalism to the left. Europe, Central Europe, fascism. What both those, again, had in common was a much more ambitious relationship between government and the economy. And I think that's, again, if you look at what's happened in Washington over the last 2 years in the face of the pandemic and the recession, and what's happening with these bills now, really it's changing dramatically what the relationship between government is taking a much more activist role. But the question is what form that's going to take politically, and whether it's going to be, again, to my astonishment, Biden, again, really has become a kind of remembrance of the New Deal on the left, or whether it's going to take a more Trumpian, Josh Hawley, you have it version on the right that's much more intolerant of minorities, makes it very hard for unions. So that's really the question. Just one other thing. What happens, again, in the 30s was U.S. goes left, Central Europe right, and France and England kind of really muddle along. They alternate between left and right. Nothing's resolved. That's what I kind of fear is going to happen in the United States, and that we're going to have what Walter Dean Burnham, my mentor as political scientist, called unstable equilibrium. And what I'd look for again in terms of that is the 2022, obviously in 2024. What I fear again is we're just going to have an alteration for a while until the next big crisis hits, and we're not going to deal with the real systematic problems that face us in the view of the disintegration of all these assumptions that held us captive from, let's say, 1980 through until the Great Recession. So that's my view of the larger forces that frame the question of democracy.
So how does that look from the 9th District of Michigan?
Yeah, so let me get grounded here. I don't really believe in optimism and pessimism. I'm an organizer, so I believe in putting people in motion and fighting for progressive change. So that's who I am in Congress. And that's, I started off when I started reading John in the early 80s, helping healthcare workers form unions, overwhelmingly women, disproportionately women of color. And really what's happened in this country, just picking up right on where John left off, is for the last 40 years, the working class and working people have gotten the short end of the stick. Their lives are super stressful. They live paycheck to paycheck. They have virtually no savings. They can't, young people can't get married. They can't buy a house. They can't send their kids to college. And if they have a tremendous amount of student debt. And this is how you get at Trump. But yes, there's racism and xenophobia that have been part of our country since before we were a country, and that's absolutely foundational in that. But the reason that I'm a little bit hopeful, Mara, is that we are operating on a level of ambition to actually deliver for the people. Just imagine a $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan that we passed without one Republican vote in the Senate or the House. And now, as Adam said, we're working on this bipartisan plan, and I'm not against it. I say, fine. This is, Joe Biden has decades of being this bipartisan guy. Go for it. But it's completely inadequate. It's completely inadequate to help women participate in the economy fully. It's completely inadequate to deal with climate change, all our big problems. So can we pull it off? A $3.5 trillion, actually, a $3.5 trillion package. So it is Rooseveltian in scale. If we pass a total of something like $6 trillion of between so really the bipartisan package is $550 billion of new money, plus 4.5, plus let's call it 2. Is that 7? I mean, anyway, I can't even count. It's big stuff.
That's a lot of dollars.
It's a lot of dollars. So I feel like the only chance that we can forestall pretty much political disaster in 2022, and I feel like the analogies to Germany in the late 20s and early 30s are not misplaced, and be scared about our democracy. I was there on January 6th. And the idea, you thought, okay, well, that's it, right? Didn't you think that? That's it. That's so outrageous. But they just pick up and keep going in the big lie. So we've got to actually deliver for the American people right now. And stay tuned, because it's not going to be easy to deliver every single Democratic vote in the Senate and almost every single Democratic vote in the House, because our margin is so thin, to pass this huge package that includes free universal daycare, pre-K, free community college, and a lot else besides. So we're in there fighting, Mara, but the outcome is very uncertain.
Well, let me ask you a question, because the assumption of that is if you deliver, first of all, delivering in and of itself is worth it, okay?
Okay.
It can make people's lives better. But the assumption behind what Andy's talking about is that if you deliver, you will be rewarded politically. What if that assumption is wrong? You've got lots of polling that shows people have no idea who is responsible for them getting their $300 per child, whatever we're calling it, child tax allowance, whatever. And they have no idea that the Democrats, are the ones who got the vaccine program up and running. What if we are so tribal that delivering for the American people does not bring the party that did it any political benefit? And one of the things that I've noticed that has marked our politics for the last 5 years is a failure of imagination. The people who believe in norms and rules and the way things should work often have a failure of imagination because they can't imagine that there's actually no bottom. Just like you said, January 6th, that was it. It should have, nope. No, now we're into saying that January 6th was actually a loving, patriotic protest gone awry. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should operate on the assumption that it won't matter. Maybe we'll be pleasantly surprised in November of 2022 as Democrats that it did turn out to matter and voters rewarded people for passing popular things. But there's a lot of evidence that it won't. There are polls showing that while the individual policies that are being passed are broadly bipartisan and have the support of 60, 70% of the American people, Biden himself is much closer to 50%, in some cases below it. So even though people like what he is passing, he is not being rewarded with additional support for passing those things. There's awareness, there's the breaking through in a media-saturated environment. That's always challenging. And there's also something that people call thermostatic polarization, which is that once it's a thermostat, and so people react in the opposite direction of what the country is doing. And so if you associate, and that often tracks with parties and party leaders. So if you tell them, what is being passed is universal childcare, they'll say, oh, I love universal childcare, and you'll get a 66% reading on a poll of how popular universal childcare is. But then you attach it to Biden, people then polarize back into their tribes, and so support.
That was true with Obamacare.
Exactly. That's
When you said, here's what we're giving you, yay, it's called Obamacare.
Yeah.
Boo.
And I think, hopefully Democrats are rewarded. I think what you said is right. You should pass it because it's good policy and will improve people's lives. But look, Obama delivered a lot of policy achievements in 2009 and 2010, and then Democrats went on to lose 63 seats in the House and 7 in the Senate in the 2010 midterms. So there's just not much evidence that you do get rewarded on the scale that will be necessary to withstand the historical forces that say that Democrats are highly likely to lose seats in the 2022 midterms. So I think you have to operate on the assumption that it will take more. It will take structural reforms. It will take voting rights legislation. It will take anti-gerrymandering proposals to counter the forces that are working.
Well, let's talk about some of those things. I did a series on NPR where Adam was in it about the difference between minority rights, as in rights for the minority party, versus minority rule. Our American system is based on minority rights, but when it turns into minority rule, people feel that's unfair. You cannot make an intellectual argument that the guy with the fewer votes should become the president. It's just second graders just will not accept that. So.
But we do it.
But we do it. Because we don't elect our presidents by popular vote. We elect them by a winner-take-all state-by-state system. So how much of a danger do you think the kind of growing, what you could call minoritarianism or counter-majoritarianism is in our country right now? We've got partisan gerrymandering to the extent that Republicans in Wisconsin can win 48% of the statewide vote and still get 60% of the seats in the state legislature. You have something like Democrats in the Senate. Remember, we're 50-50, but Democrats in the Senate represent 40 million people, more than Republicans. And obviously, twice in the last 20 years, the guy with the fewer votes became the president. I don't know how many more times we can have something like that before the system falls apart. But let's start with Andy, because look, you're an elected representative, and I know you're in a safe blue seat, but, okay, is this something that you are concerned about?
Well, we'll leave my seat out of it, but we face redistricting. Michigan's losing a seat, and happily we got rid of partisan gerrymandering by passing a statewide initiative called Voters Not Politicians. So we will have a citizen commission like we should have in every state do the redistricting. But then my own, I'm kind of off in a corner and I could get redistricted into an impossible situation. So stay tuned about that. More broadly, I don't think we can survive as a democracy if we don't stop this voter suppression and this attempt to all these bills going around the states not only amount to voter suppression, they also include language where if the state legislatures don't like the outcome, they can just change it too. So overturning democratic
And it's
elections.
perfectly legal.
But that would be the end of our
Yeah.
232-year experiment
Yeah.
with democracy if you want to start from when Congress started. So I think it's crucial. And it's not just in the South. So just passing the John Lewis Act, what we call H.R. 4, wouldn't be enough because states like Michigan and Iowa, which has already passed this stuff, aren't subject to supervision under the Voting Rights Act. So we have to pass at least significant parts of the For the People Act, H.R. 1 in the House, S1 in the Senate. And I don't know whether, some people argue that's the key to 2022. Some people argue delivering for people is the key. Obviously, we need to try to do both. And so the Senate has to get in motion and pass something. I assume it may be something that is stripped down from the big, humongous bill that H.R. 1 and S1 is. We don't have time to talk about all the details of it, but it has public financing of campaigns. It has ending revolving doors. It has sunshine. I've got
DC
It has
statehood.
voter
DC
ID.
statehood, voter
Because
election day
it's
being
the
a
Joe
national
Manchin
holiday.
bill.
Well, but we need something that Joe Manchin of 2021 will go for, and God knows what that is. But whatever it is, I'm for it. John?
Adam, oh,
Well, I'll let me go back to what Adam was talking about the, what would make it possible for the Democrats to win or not win in 2022 and 24. Because, look, on the economic stuff, I think that I'm much less critical, believe it or not, of what they're doing than you guys are. I was very happy with the competitiveness bill that the Senate passed, and it's universal broadband, all this stuff. I think that's very important. And, Biden's making a real effort. So that's one thing. Pandemic. Is he going to be able to control the pandemic? Much more worried there about how they're dealing with the Delta thing and how the CDC is doing it, and the criticism starting to emerge of that. The third thing is thematic and the image of the parties. And both parties right now have extremes. On the Republican Party, you get the Trump extreme. Democratic Party, you get the defund the police. I don't want to get into the whole debate, but more the 1619, the view that race is the most fundamental question. You get in both parties, in other words, things that the other side can take advantage of. A lot of the reason the Democrats won Georgia, won those 2 Senate seats, was because Trump became salient. He went down there and really screwed the candidates with all his stop the steal. So I think a lot in 2022 and 2024 is going to be on what part of that becomes salient. Because if people are worried about Trump again, plus they see Biden again doing economic things and doing all right with the pandemic, I think there is an actual chance that the Democrats will do okay. If not, Democrats are going to be in trouble. So that's,
Adam, you spend like 22 hours of every day thinking about this.
Well, yeah, and I just want to be. I also have a very high opinion of the things that they're passing. I just think it might not matter.
Well, talk
an
about this
electoral
other
scenario.
stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think that, look, I think in the past 100 years, the out party, the party that's not in the White House, or rather the party that's in the White House, has lost seats in the midterms every time except for 3 cycles in the last 100 years. So you're betting against historical trends to think that Democrats will pick up seats, and frankly, one of the most recent time that happened, where the party in power managed to gain seats in the midterms, was 1998, when Democrats gained seats. But an analysis that I read recently by David Shore, who's a big leading data analyst, showed that if Democrats win the same proportion of the national vote in 2022 as they won in 1998, when they managed to retain seats, they would still lose the House because of gerrymandering.
That's what partisan gerrymandering.
So you have to outperform historical trends, not just slightly, but massively, and that's just a reality. And so I am hopeful that all of this great stuff that they are passing will cause Democrats to be rewarded at the polls in 2022. But you have historical trends that suggest that's not going to happen, and then you also have the fact that there's probably close to a calendar year in between when they're going to pass most of their stuff and when the elections happen, and that's a long time for other things to become salient, as John said. So you've just got a lot working against you, and I think that is why I agree with Congressman Levin that we need to pass really good things, but we also have to pass structural reforms to go directly at the causes of this imbalance that is putting Democrats sort of behind the 8 ball when it comes to the midterms.
Well, let's talk about the structural reforms, because, as that really great musical Hamilton said, you don't have the votes. And one of the things that was the most important stories of 2020, of course, it got kind of overlooked because Joe Biden won, Donald Trump didn't win. A couple months later, the Democrats won the Senate by the skin of their teeth. Democrats did terrible in 2020. Down ballot, below the presidential race, they lost seat. They didn't win, pick up seats in Congress or state legislatures, and it wasn't for lack of trying. Barack Obama and Eric Holder spent tremendous amounts of time raising lots of money. This was the year that Democrats told us they weren't going to ignore down ballot races. Everyone was surprised. Republicans were shocked. They thought they were going to lose more seats in the House, and they were prepared for losing seats on the state legislature level. The reason why these laws, these voter suppression and partisan takeover of the electoral machinery is happening is because in places like Arizona and Georgia and Texas, there aren't Democratic votes in the state legislature to stop them. So Democrats have to win more elections in order to make these structural reforms. Joe Manchin would not be the most important guy in the Senate if you had 2 more, right? Or even one, maybe even one more. So just since we are in our blue cocoon here, and we're not, we don't have a diverse panel, let's just talk
Or otherwise.
Let's just talk about what Democrats need to do to win races when their policy proposals are not just popular, extraordinarily popular. Some of these are poll like 2 to 1. And yes, there are all sorts of barriers, partisan gerrymandering. There's tons and tons of structural barriers. Plus, there's the whole system of minoritarian institutions that work against them. But the bottom line is Democrats did really poorly in 2020.
Defund the police got a lot of attention in the post-election analyses, but I think when you dig deeper, one of a cause that I think was even more important was the lack of a sharp economic message. And this is, I think, defund the police is in a lot of ways a distraction from that. I think there was some very conventional messaging around, healthcare worked for Democrats in 2018, so they just tried to rerun the playbook and focus on healthcare messaging in 2020. Healthcare was very salient, as John said, in 2018 because Republicans were in control of Congress and trying to take it away from them, from people, and so that gave it a saliency that it didn't have in 2020. So I think that making some difficult choices among Democrats about a sharper economic message that might have to go a little more aggressive than some of the party are comfortable with would probably be a smart idea.
Do you want to go?
Well, on the election stuff, I was appalled by that HR 1 with all the 900-page bill to reform the thing. My view, Sunday voting or making Election Day a holiday would solve 100 problems, because a lot of the things even that the Republicans are doing now, and I'm not including that state legislature stuff, which I would hope the courts would throw out. A lot of the stuff is retrospective. I mean, you can't do mail-in voting 4 weeks in advance. A lot of it, was from the pandemic era. They're fighting the last war. and there's some considerable support for some kind of voter ID. So, some very simple thing like that even if the Democrats were to lose, would be popular and would at least make the point. That would be the direction I'd go on the voting and structural thing, because you're not going to get the big bills. Maybe the John Lewis bill, but not the major reform that the Democrats are looking for.
So I feel like people almost always get political predictions wrong, and I've been doing this since I was a little kid, before I remember, because my dad, who's here, Congressman Andy Levin, he became a state senator when I was 4, so I don't remember at all of his elections. But let's talk about what actually happened in 2020, Mara, in Michigan. For example, we lost those state legislative races because so many people turned out for Donald Trump. That's just it. Now, this is a little complicated, right? Because Trump won Michigan in 2016 by 14 times less than Biden won it in 2020. So their thing of like, Trump really won and this was stolen, it's absurd, right? But still, so you got to hold that thought, right? Biden won Michigan convincingly. Okay, hold on to that. At the same time, Trump got more votes than anybody ever got in Michigan besides Joe Biden in 2020. So around the state, in a county commission race, in a state legislative race, they swamped a lot of our candidates. Donald Trump is not on the ballot in 2022. Plus, the Republican Party is, are they in disarray? Are they in civil war? What is going on? That's a whole thing we won't talk much about, but I think it could actually have a huge impact on the election, because there's I guess what happened to talking about suburban women and college-educated women? Anyway, a lot of where I live, which was Republican territory, a lot of my district, the wealthier parts of it, which is now all Democratic, and the working class side is all Trump. It's woo. But anyway, Mara, those people aren't going to vote for if they put up super Trumpy candidates for state legislature or anything else. So I think it's very hard to predict. And finally, let me just say that, yes, Adam, we're passing, hopefully, we haven't passed this stuff yet, but hopefully we're passing it kind of early, right, if we get this done this fall. But it goes to what both of you have said. We have to get out there subsequently and crank on this. Every 15th of every month, we should be with a different set of parents who are getting $300 a kid every month to raise their families, right? And if we pass the rest of it, we'll have a lot of other things like that. And I think Democrats haven't had a sharp message, but also just haven't been effective at connecting emotionally with people about these issues. So I think a lot hangs on that as well.
Honestly,
We're going to
one
open it
other
up.
thing about the
Okay,
state.
we're going to open it up to questions.
Okay.
I promise. Go ahead.
Just
John.
one other thing. I used to cover a lot of those little elections, the state legislature and stuff. And the key things for Democrats in many of the states was the labor movement. And you can see what happened in Wisconsin after 2011. A lot of the enduring victories of the Republicans in the state races is because, that was the infrastructure of the Democratic Party on a local level. Republicans have chambers of commerce, NRA clubs, which, leave aside the NRA at the top, those are very important, and churches. And those bring out the vote in a lot of those little state elections.
And social media.
Yeah. We don't, the Democrats are starting to do it, but a lot of, indivisible things like that, but we don't, that's a lot of the problem that Democrats are having. And it's institutional, it's a lack of.
So, Mara, I have to just say that how much I agree with John. More than voting rights legislation and more than delivering on these individual economic things, the number one structural thing we could do to save our democracy is to restore the freedom to form unions and bargain collectively in this country. And that's my, believe it, that's my number one legislative
that the PRO Act?
priority.
Is that-
The PRO Act. We got to pass the PRO Act.
So we'll keep on talking, but we really want to get you into the discussion. So if anybody has a question or a comment, forget what the format is. Are
There's
there
microphones,
Yes,
I
there are
see.
the microphones. So please go
In
up
each
to the
aisle,
mics.
it looks like.
Yes.
One there and
Yeah,
one
you
there.
don't have to walk very far. Yeah, but I think that the point about the every 15th of every month, there should have been, the check should have been publisher clearinghouse size. With a balloon, with a bouquet of balloons attached to them.
They
Go
mostly
ahead.
just go into your bank
Yeah,
account.
right,
actually.
that's the problem, yeah.
Lot to say, great ideas out there. But I'm surprised no one has said that it's what Stacey Abrams did in organizing in Georgia that made the real difference, not just Trump coming there. And I was in the state of South Carolina and saw one of the best run campaigns in advertising I've ever seen yet. Jamie Harrison lost just as badly as anybody else ever has this run. And yet in Georgia, which I didn't expect because of Stacey Abrams organizing and door to door, that kind of that made the difference. And I think that's what it's got to take in South Carolina. But I was working with her in 2011 on the redistricting, and she was starting at that then. And that's what the Republicans have done to get the state legislatures in the other states. So I don't know how you say it, but isn't this important? You're an organizer. You were an organizer. Organizing and getting people prepared for how important democracy is to be at that ground level working it, all the way from the school boards to the 2020 elections, 22 elections, to the presidential. It's so critical. And I don't think people make the connection between voting and everything else that goes on in their life. They just don't.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And I think, one of the things, Mara mentioned some of the national groups that had formed to support state level voting efforts. Oftentimes there's too much sort of top-down direction from Washington. And what you had in Georgia was Stacey Abrams and her groups were given the ability to do it themselves, and the national organizations and a lot of the funding followed their model and followed their advice. So when you allow organizers on the ground to lead, and you have a national structure that's willing to devote resources but not insist on doing it their way, but rather will actually listen to the people on the ground who are in the communities doing the work, that is a model for success. You have some states where that happens. Georgia's one. Nevada, where Senator Reid built a similar machine, was one where it's been very successful. But that is crucial, funding it from the ground up and letting local leaders take
And
over.
Jamie Harrison has a pretty good perch to apply all those lessons, because now he's the head of the DNC. Yeah, if he learned them. Yeah.
Georgia, I just want to say one thing about it, just a factual matter. David Perdue came within like 10 votes of getting a majority in that state in the regular election. Things changed from whatever it was, November 6th to January, whatever.
5th, yeah.
The key change was in those suburbs outside of Atlanta. It wasn't in Atlanta, and it was upscale. It wasn't all white. It was multicultural. But again, I think a lot of that was Trump. And I'm not, again, Stacey Abrams did a great job, but I'm just reinforcing the importance of Trump and the radical right being salient in elections and how much that helped the Democrats.
One other point that I'd make is that when you look at the margins between Warnock and Ossoff, Ossoff was the candidate who folks in Washington D.C. recruited more aggressively, but Warnock was the one who dragged him across the finish line.
Yeah, I think.
And Warnock outperformed Ossoff, and Ossoff probably would not have won if it wasn't for Warnock.
And he got the 6-year seat.
And then Ossoff gets
Well,
the 6-year
that's
seat, and
better.
Warnock has to run again.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's tricky, but I think listening to folks on the ground about who the type of candidates that they should run. I mean, I remember when we ran Michelle Nunn in Georgia in 2014, and she got crushed. I mean, I think DC has a certain idea of a type of candidate who succeeds, but I think Ossoff fit that model. Warnock did not, but then Warnock ended up outperforming Ossoff.
Are you getting this theme here? Everything people thought they knew was wrong. Over and over again.
I just want to sweep all cynicism aside and say that Stacey Abrams is a hero
Yes.
of mine and all of ours. And not in part because of how much she empowered. Not only is she an amazing organizer in the operation she built, but she empowered others. So Asian American turnout in Georgia was like a record on January 5th. So that is huge. And just personally, what I'm doing is I don't know what you call this. Almost every state has something like this. In Michigan, we have precinct delegates. We voted a precinct, that's what we call it. Many states use that terminology. And each party, both parties, elect a certain number of people in every precinct based on how many people vote in that precinct. And they don't, what are they, right? That's a whole thing. But I said in Michigan, because of some of the reforms, I don't really remember whether the Howard Dean era reforms or Bernie reforms. Anyway, they lost their power. They used to elect the delegates to the county party who elected the delegates to the state party convention. Anyway, I said, I don't care how little power they have. There's 800 slots for Democratic precinct delegates in Michigan's 9th District. Like the rest of Michigan, and I think the country, maybe 30% of them are ever filled. I'm trying to fill 100% of those slots with an army of people ready to save our democracy. So.
Hi. My question is, what do you think is more dangerous to our democracy, the radical left or the radical right?
These are the wrong people to ask.
Yeah.
Good question.
The radical right, it's pretty clear, and that's, there's a lot of history behind that. The radical left is pretty much, I call it Greater Brooklyn, but I get criticized for that. And I mean, there's a lot of different people who live in Brooklyn, or Greater Brooklyn Oberlin, or something like that, but it's not... The Trump thing was very scary to me after the January 6th and what happened after the election and the Stop the Steal. I mean, I've been around for a long time. I've never seen anything like that in American politics. And, we're going to see some more of that. And, that's again, I think that should be that's the focus of my concern, not, the cancel culture or whatever, even though I, don't like a lot of it.
Look, there's fundamentalism on the left and the right. It's just
Yeah.
right now the left is, that portion of the left is smaller.
There's fewer guns.
Follow up on Mara's point about minority rights versus minority rules. Adam has done us all a fabulous favor by writing this book and then going on MSNBC with Lawrence O'Donnell and explaining it so that even super geeks like myself got that basic point, the distinction between minority rights versus minority rule. So if there's one meme that everyone should have in their head about the filibuster issue, that's the issue. So Adam, if you could just go one more step into the, God forbid, weeds about this so we can effing understand it, really understand it, please take the microphone.
Thank you very much for that plug. I appreciate it. No, look, I mean, that's I talk about this a lot in the book, but it's we discuss a lot about protection of minority rights, but what gets lost in that discussion is that is the role of majority rule, which was supposed to be the guiding principle of our democracy and in every individual aspect of our government. Every decision point was supposed to be majority rule. And while the framers were very concerned with protecting the rights of the minority, the way they defined those rights were the ability to have input, the ability to debate an issue at length, the ability to have your say, and to have states represented in the Senate rather than people, or the House represents populations. All these things were built into the structure of the government to protect minority rights. But the framers were extraordinarily clear that when push came to shove, and when minority rights ran up against majority rule, that majority rule should take precedence every single time. And the Senate was a majority rule body for its entire existence up until the 1960s or so. The one category of legislation for which it was not majority rule until that time was civil rights. And the filibuster was used exclusively to kill civil rights bills through the Jim Crow era. But it just, there's really no debating this. It just was supposed to be majority rule. The Senate was supposed to be a place where bills, you debate them a while, the minority gets to have their say, but then when push comes to shove, it comes up for a vote, and whoever has a majority wins. So minority rights are important, but we tend to dramatically overstate the role that they play, and that is what has led us to the situation we have, where you have policies that are supported by huge bipartisan majorities of people, 66, 70%, but they can't get passed because a minority that can represent as little as 1/3 of the country is effectively given veto power over that. And this was a situation the framers foresaw. They were not right about everything. They were wrong about a lot. But in terms of system design, they designed a system that was supposed to be able to adapt and change and reflect the will of the majority. And that is something that we do not have anymore.
Can I just say something about this from like actual experience of my job? Like I go to work every day, right? So I got sent by the people of Oakland and Macomb counties to Washington to take care of business for them, right? So we passed sensible gun reform, 2 pieces of it so far, this Congress. We passed the Violence Against Women Act, this Congress. We passed the Equality Act, so LGBTQ people will be fully equal in all aspects of life in our country. In this Congress, we passed the PRO Act in the House in this Congress. We passed H.R. 1 to save our democracy from voter suppression. And I'm not saying all of that would pass if the Senate would just have majority rule, but a lot of it would, and this country would be way better off. And I would be able to say to my constituents, gee, we actually accomplished something, instead of we passed something through the House, but it's sitting in the Senate. Doesn't really, they just want it done, right? They want their $15 an hour. They don't want me to say I voted for it and the House passed it, right? And I don't see how it, and I just want to say something put what you said a little stronger, Adam. The only thing the filibuster was used for most of its history, was so that black people would not be full equal participants in our democracy. It's a shameful legacy, and it's time to end it. So read Adam's book and get mad.
I think,
And if Democrats elect a couple more senators,
No. 60 votes it takes to do anything.
if Democrats elect a couple more senators, maybe they can have a carve out to the
There you
filibuster,
go.
because it only takes
that's the
50
way to
votes
do
to
it.
change the
That's
rules,
right.
51 votes
That's
to
right.
change the rules.
That's right.
Touche.
Armand, do you want?
So we hear that it's Senator Manchin and maybe Senator Sinema who won't vote to change the rules. What's your sense of whether there are others, so that if, for example, the Democrats actually won one more seat in the Senate, or perhaps 2 more seats in the Senate, as unlikely as it may seem, in 2022, could they change the rules? Or are there other Democrats lurking in the weeds who would vote against changing the rules?
That's
Either partially or fully.
That's a really, really important question. First of all, right now we know there are more Democrats that agree with Sinema and Manchin. They just don't want to be out in front. On the other hand, if Manchin changed his mind for a carve out on the filibuster, would they all follow him or resist that? What do you think, Adam?
Voting rights, you mean.
Yeah, carve out on voting rights. That's what I meant.
Yeah,
because
I mean-
Adam is our only Senate representative here.
right. It's I'm in the minority. There's a chicken and egg aspect to it, because it's true that if Manchin and Sinema flipped, everybody else would come along. And there's also the fact that I think, if the White House were to lean in more aggressively, that would have an influence.
Do you really believe that Joe Biden has power to do this?
I do. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah, I
He
do.
can change Joe
Yeah, it's
Manchin's
like-
mind, despite the politics of West Virginia.
Yeah, because I don't.
Okay.
I mean, it's popular in West Virginia. I mean, it's popular.
Wait,
I mean,
you mean voting rights act is
yeah,
popular.
that's
Okay.
right. I think, and Manchin has supported filibuster reform in the past when he still represented West Virginia. So it's not political suicide in West Virginia to support it. And Biden, it's like Nixon going to China. I mean, he has the credibility to say, me, Joe Biden, I've tried everything possible, and I've come to the conclusion that this reform is necessary, and I wouldn't be doing it if it weren't. So he has unique persuasive power to do something like that.
But first,
I
they need
think-
to get HR 1 slimmed down.
Well, that's true, and that's happening.
Yeah.
Senator Klobuchar comes tomorrow. I mean, she can talk more about that. But there's a compromise that's to be had on this bill that Manchin would support, that could get
Right.
50 votes and pass if there was a carve out. So I think what's still possible is some sort of carve out. And in that group that's supposedly also hesitant, the sort of silent 8 or whatever, for instance, Mark Warner is supposed to be a member of that silent group, but he has come out in support of a carve-out and volunteered that. He wasn't sort of pressed. So I think that if you're talking about full abolition of the filibuster, there are definitely more senators who would oppose that. But if you're talking about a narrow carve-out at a point where it's clear that bipartisan compromise is not happening on that, I do think that you could, and you have the White House decide to really go all in on it, I think that's still a possibility.
Hi. As you look throughout American history, there seems to be a common trend that crises are what spur significant change. At this point, with seeing everything that's happened and the numerous crises that we've faced, what's it going to take for actual change to happen?
Well, you thought January 6th would do it. It's hard
Well,
to say.
I think that if the bills that we're considering in the legislative we're considering in the reconciliation package for the FY 2022 budget represent big change in this country. And I think the situation is this. I believe our democracy is still hanging by a thread, and we might be on the cusp of real change. And so my pessimism is, listen, democracy is still hanging by a thread. And my optimism is, and I represent the place where the term Reagan Democrat was coined by Stan Greenberg in 1984, and where the working class and the white working class, when people like Mara Liasson, these famous national reporters, go somewhere to cover that, they come to my district more than any other place in America. And I feel like if we can deliver to people really like that when they're sitting at their kitchen table and they're looking at their pocketbook, and they're like, if they have 3 kids under 6 in the house, like Mary and I used to, they would get $900 a month extra. I mean, that is huge, and carry that over to $15 an hour and all these other things. So I think we're on the cusp of delivering change potentially that would make a huge difference in people's lives. So that's the optimistic part.
And to answer your question about crises, the agenda that Andy's talking about is a response to the crisis that the pandemic made bare. It existed before the pandemic, but the pandemic was like a brutal X-ray on what was happening to the middle class in this country, what was happening to frontline workers, et cetera.
Who would have thought Joe Biden would have said? I mean, this is all.
Yeah.
What we're trying to pass is literally his agenda. It's impressive what he's.
And it's in response to a crisis. In some way, it was a slow-moving one, but it really burst into the open with the pandemic and the recession. We have 1 minute. Oh.
I just want to say how great it is to have young people come up and ask these questions, and I wonder if you all could speak to what this upcoming generation can do to help all us, we're turning out to be super fuddy-duddies, like we just can't get it done. So we need them, and if you can give some ideas about that, that would be great.
Yeah, when Rui Teixeira and I wrote the Emerging Democratic Majority in 2002, I think one of the things we really didn't anticipate was what was going to happen with younger voters. Because, there's always this saying, what's your socialist when you're young if you have a heart, and then you become a conservative later if you have a brain or whatever. I mean, that people as they get older become more conservative, and we don't quite see that happening from the 18 to 29 to the later generation. And I don't know if we have 1 minute left. I mean, but I talk about this in my one of my books. Great Recession, incredibly important. Disillusionment, the idea that kids could have lifetime employment, that they could look forward to having careers and jobs. A lot of that crashes. Student debt, climate change, I think for that younger generation is sort of like the nuclear war was for us in the 50s, and we were a little hysterical about it. And I think that sometimes the Extinction Rebellion, people like that are a little on the nutty side. But I think that that's a reality for them that it might not be for people who were senior citizens or whatever. So you know, you have all those factors that have really changed, and they're a big force now in politics, and they're turning out to a degree that we never imagined in 1972. We thought that McGovern would win because the 18-year-olds would vote. And, if you recall that election, it didn't turn out that way.
So Andy, in your district, are young people engaged even
Well,
now?
the shirt that I brought to for my pajamas is my Democracy Summer T-shirt. So I just want to remember Rich Trumka, who passed away just shockingly. I ran the field operation of the campaign where John Sweeney and Rich Trumka and Linda Chavez Thompson were elected, the only insurgent takeover in the history of the AFL since the AFL and the CIO merged in 1955 until today. But the first thing they had me do, Mara, was create Union Summer. And we put 1,000 young people out on the streets on union organizing and bargaining campaigns, super diverse, and it woke up the labor movement, in 1996, the summer of 1996. And I just finished a Democracy Summer group in my district. And if you want to have hope in the future, spend time with young people. So I think the answer is we have to give them real power. We have to tell them that their ideas matter, that coming up to the mic is a great thing, and that we need to give them the keys to the car because they're ready to save our life on earth as we know it, and they're so ready for a diverse and equal society where everybody can participate. And God knows it's a long last. It's time for that.
That's a great way to end this. Yeah, I think that's behind you.